Welcome back, everyone, to another Adventure Box podcast day. This is Zach Edwards, the CEO of Historical Conquest, who is sponsoring this podcast, where we're talking all things history about the American Revolution right now. Normally, in this broader scheme, it's actually all American history, and we're doing everything from ancient American history, which was back in September time, August, September, until today, which we're talking about the American Revolution, and by the time we end before June, we'll actually be hitting the Civil War. So we got a lot of ground to catch up, especially when it comes to the birth of the nation, which is next. So let's get into the American Revolution. We're going to hit this quite fast, but there's a lot of battles to talk about. And again, like I said, we're ending the American Revolution today, which will actually bring out a lot of aftermath effects as well, which we'll go over some of them as we get there. Okay, so now that we give the overview, let's get into what we're talking about first. So we're going to talk about first the Battle of Cowpen. The Battle of Cowpen. What the heck kind of name is that? Well, actually, Cowpen is actually a city down here in North Carolina. So there's Cowpen. Just a normal kind of rural area. Never became much of a big city. Just still a small little town. But there was a battle that was fought here outside of Cowpen, and it doesn't show the actual battle site anymore. It had, but I'll just go over it. So this is the Southern Theater. So the war is like brutally being fought right now. It's fast moving. There's a lot of conflicts. This is all 1781. So again, let's see. General Nathaniel Greene became leader over the Southern campaign after Horatio Gates basically failed and majorly brutal defeat. So he was taken out of command. General Greene came in, and his main, what everyone knows him as, is a person that can do hit and run tactics. Again, we were talking about this last time. His tactics were not anything that the British were used to. So he, Francis Marion, and a few others could do these tactics. Now, he actually was a master of what they call the Fabian tactics. The Fabian tactics. These were military tactics of avoiding direct confrontation. He knew that the British were well trained. He knew that the British could defeat them on a larger battlefield. So he picked up the Fabian tactics. Now, what are the Fabian tactics? Have you ever heard of Quintus Fabius Maximus Vereticus? He was the general, the Roman general, in the Second Punitive Wars. This is around 218 to 201 BC. Now, Fabius earned the nickname of his Cunator, which actually means the delayer. So his strategy was actually to fight against the Carthaginian, general Hannibal. Hannibal, you probably heard of him. So if you look at the Mediterranean Sea, you have Rome up here, you have Carthage down here on the opposite side of the Mediterranean. Hannibal moved his troops to the Straits of Gibraltar, which connected Africa to Spain, crossed it, and crossed over into Italy to take on Rome. Well, because of that, the Romans had to fight back. So Fabius and his other generals that went after in the Second Punitive War, and actually I think that was the First Punitive War. We're getting there in Roman history. Hannibal was not used to a cut and run type of delay tactics that would basically stop the direct attacks. Hannibal was all for direct attacks. He had his war elephants. He had his troops. He knew exactly how to do it on a level battlefield. Fabius did not. Not that he didn't know. He did not want to do that. He knew that in order to take on Hannibal, he had to take him indirectly and hit him where it hurts. He would avoid major battles. He cut off Hannibal's supply lines. He harassed the troops with small skirmishes. It all allowed time to buy Rome the time to give him more strength. So more of his strength was coming, and he could not actually do it. They could not actually make it there before the battle started. So he had all these different tactics to increase time. So the American Revolution, George Washington and other patriot leaders used these Fabian tactics to delay, especially in the Southern campaign. We're going to see this not just with, sorry, I'm trying to remember his name, General Daniel Morgan, who's actually the one that fights in Cowpen, but we're all going to see this from Nathaniel Greene later on. So let me just tell you, let me give you a little broader information of what's going on. So again, you have Horatio Gates. When he lost against Tarleton, he went up to, Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, at this same time, you have Tarleton, who is vying for fights. He's with Cornwallis, and they basically somewhat split off. Cornwallis goes after Nathaniel Greene, again, the commanding officer of the Southern campaign, much like Horatio Gates was. Tarleton goes after General Daniel Morgan. This is why, this is the great part of this battle. This is actually one of the most tactical battles that were fought in the South. And the reason why I say this is Morgan, he knew that he could not defeat him in a direct fight, a normal fight. So he created 3 lines of troops. This was actually to trap Tarleton. The first 2 lines consisted of sharpshooters and the militias. The sharpshooters would take out as many people as possible. The militia were ready to jump at the fight if the fight came to them. This inflicted heavy casualties before retreating. Those 2 groups would then retreat. So sharpshooters take out the people as much as possible as they're running. Militia attack them, take them out as they're coming in. But it basically just lured in the British troops. The British moved forward into the troops, not seeing that the well-trained troops were behind them, waiting for the battle to get going. The soldiers on the British side to get tired. And so the Continental Army's 3rd line, made up of these very trained soldiers, just waited. And then all of a sudden, as the militia retreated behind the 3rd line then attacked. And this basically captured and killed 800 soldiers. 800 British soldiers died, or wounded, or were captured. And so this is very significant. 800 is a good amount, but it's also the fact that even Tarleton was captured. So the victory at Cowpen crippled Tarleton's forces and boosted the morale of the Patriots. This is, again, a small battle. This is not very big. Small town, not much going on. But Morgan was being pursued by Tarleton, and he knew he had to attack back. So the victory at Cowpen crippled Tarleton. He's done for. Or not. Well, you're going to find out that he actually holds a grudge. I think I told you last time that he is one of the most egotistical British officers. He is known as the Butcher, and we're going to find out why in just a little bit. Yeah, actually, I'll have to bring that up fairly soon. Okay, so the next, remember I was saying Cornwallis went after General Greene. Now, General Greene was the new commanding officer of the Southern campaign. So Cornwallis, being the major general over all of it, he goes after the commanding officer. Now, after Cowpen, Cornwallis is in pursuit. They're still in North Carolina. He decides to take on Greene. Now, Greene, on the other side, avoids direct confrontation. He basically uses those Fabian tactics. Delays, attacks, non-direct attacks, hit and runs. All these things in order to stop Cornwallis from being able to attack. Now, here's the thing. It was on March 15th, 1781. So again, Cowpen was January 17th, 1781. During the winter, that all happened. March 15th, 1781, just getting into spring. Again, Greene decides he chooses to make a stand. And this is at the Guilford Courthouse. So the track of all the Continental Army that came to join them was about, oops, that's right, I gotta get rid of this. I'm gonna get rid of Yorktown right now. So that's the Yorktown, no, that's not, yeah, that's not North, okay. So I took off Yorktown. So this is the direct marching path. Takes about 2 days, 56 hours of marching. It's a long time. 153 miles. I did a 50 miler. It took me, well, it should have taken me 5 days. We did it in 4 days. 50 milers with hiking backpacks, basically the same weight as these soldiers would do. Now, I did up in the Yukon, up in Alaska, crossing over the Chilkat Mountains. So it was a little bit different. And as you can see from the elevation, they climbed and fell about 4,000 feet in both directions. But it was the same sea level, averaged out about 800 feet off the ocean. Okay, so they're coming up and they're trying to fight. So they get to the courthouse is Guilford Courthouse, and he positions his troops in a defensive formation, similar to what Morgan did with the different lines. Now, he did everything possible to delay Cornwallis, but now he has to fight. He knows he has to fight. Cornwallis attacks with 2,100 trained professional troops. Greene has 4,500, but for some reason, Cornwallis thinks, hey, I've got more men, I can take them on. Okay, maybe so. So there's a fierce battle. The British are very well trained, very well suited for this type of battle when he gets to the courthouse. And so eventually the American forces have to retreat. They suffered 500 casualties. Oh, sorry, no, they didn't. The British suffered 500 casualties. Remember, 2,000, lose 500. That's 1,500. That's a quarter of their men. But they still are able to take out Greene's men. He was able to push them back. Well, so Greene's running away, and at this point, oh yeah, this is when Cornwallis figures, I've got 1,500 men. They're tired. They don't have the supplies they need. We need to find shelter. We need to find a way out of here. So where do they go? So remember, this is only 2 days trek. Now let's add in one more destination. Let's go to Yorktown, because he is heading up to Yorktown to get away. So it goes from 54 miles. Oh, and actually, let's do this. Make it easier. Let's get rid of Cowpen. 92 miles marching. 92 hours. 253 miles. That's literally like 6 days, 7, 8 days of full marching all day long. That's a long way. He brings his 1,500 troops all the way up into Yorktown because he needs to resupply and get things done. Well, here's the thing. He basically pinned himself. This is Yorktown. Well, that's not Yorktown. Where are you driving me? Well, I guess this is all Yorktown. Yorktown, Virginia. So it's all this area. So what happens here? You have the British in here, and do you see what's wrong here? At that point, there was no bridge here. At that point, you just came down. The York River is on this side. You come into this peninsula. Oh yeah, there it is. It's a peninsula. You come into this area, you have no escape. Now, there were British ships that you could board, but that would basically be a surrender. So he comes back. He tries to get as many as possible supplies, additional troops. But what happens? He actually has people behind him. That's right. He doesn't just have Greene, who's now gotten new supplies and is able to come up. Now he has, from the north, General George Washington reporting. And French General, and now I'm going to really butcher this one, and I apologize. Rochambeau. Rocham? Rochambeau. That's how it shows, Rochambeau. But they are there to trap Cornwallis. Now, Cornwallis, commanding officer of the whole army, of everything that's happening in the colonies. The French Navy also comes in. Remember, they do have British ships in that area, but the French Navy comes in as well. Well, thank you, French, for finally showing up. Again, it takes them a while after saying they will join to actually bring the troops in. And so they join them in this area. George Washington sends the message through the French to the French ships to come down to Yorktown because they're going to trap Cornwallis. If he cannot escape by land, which he can't because it's a peninsula and he's trapped in there, and he can't escape by sea because the French have now taken over that bay, this is a time where, yeah, sorry, you can't escape. This is the Battle of Chesapeake. This is where the British come out here into Chesapeake Bay. The British come out and meet up with the French, and they have the Battle of Chesapeake. It is one of the most decisive water battles ever fought in the American Revolution. Now remember, there's not much that is actually fought in the Atlantic Ocean or any of the bays because the Continental Army had no real ships. The only ships they had were merchant ships. They were not made for battle. The French had full-on naval forces, and they were able to take on the British in the Chesapeake Bay and beat them. So, and this is done by thank you to Admiral de Grasse. Grasse. Yeah, Grasse. So he defeats the British fleet at the Battle of Chesapeake, cutting off Cornwallis from escaping by sea. He can't escape by land. So the Continental Army continues to bombard them. September, Washington's army forces arrive with the French troops, surround Yorktown with 16,000 men, 16,000 soldiers. The final assault, and this takes over between September and October. October 14th, the Americans capture the British redoubts, the fortifications, outside of Yorktown, forcing Cornwallis to surrender 5 days later. So October 19th, the British lost 8,000 troops, their largest defeat in the whole war. This literally, basically ends the American Revolution, except for this reason. A lot of the British soldiers that are not in this area, the British troops that are still inland, don't get word. Or if they do get word, they're like, oh, we're not giving up. Including Tarleton. That's right. Tarleton is one of the biggest one of those that really continues to challenge the end of the war. This leads to what we call the Battle of Blue Licks. So after Yorktown is over, the battles are over. The treaties are starting to be signed, are being reviewed or negotiated. This is when the Battle of Blue Licks happens. As peace negotiations drag on, fighting continues. You have the Patriot militia and you have the Loyalist forces. You have Tarleton still out and about. You have others still out and about. At Blue Licks, a small Patriot force, about 180 men, pursued a larger group of British Loyalists going south and native allies. Now, this is where they get it really wrong. No way should you ever go after a larger British troop with native allies. Again, the native allies are better at these tactics than you are. And so, in this fight, the Patriots walk into an ambush and they have so many losses. Out of the 180, they lose 70. It's a third of their people. So 70 Americans are killed. 70 colonists are killed. This makes it actually one of the bloodiest defeats in the Western theater. The Battle of Blue Lick was a tragic reminder that the wars are brutal even at their ending. Because for one thing, remember, what we're going to get into, we haven't talked about this yet, Battle of War of 1812. New Orleans is attacked after the treaty is even signed. It's signed. It's done. It's a done deal. and yet they still attack. Okay, so in addition to that, let's talk about Tarleton himself and what he did. Okay, I was just going back to my notes. I wanted to see what was happening with Tarleton, and actually, during the battle, he actually came with Cornwallis up into Yorktown, so he was actually there, and he wasn't able to do much because he's a cavalry man, and the battle never really got to cavalry, so he actually didn't really get to see much battle during the Battle of Yorktown. Now, he is actually captured as part of the group that is captured, and he is paroled, sent back up to New York. I don't know why he's sent back up to New York, to the British in New York, and at that point, they set sail for Great Britain. Now, what I had wrong was the battle that I was thinking about. It's called the Battle of Wax. What is it? Wax. Oh, man. I was just looking it up, and now I've lost it in my notes. Let's see. Oh, yes, right. Waxhaws. So this is 1780. So his forces were accused of slaughtering surrendered American troops. This is why he became the Butcher. This is also known as the Tarleton Quarter. This incident, after he had taken on Waxhaws, Waxhaws. We didn't actually talk about this battle. Maybe we should have, but it was a smaller battle. But when the American troops were captured, surrendered, they were slaughtered. And this is why they called it the Tarleton Quarter. So basically means no mercy. So his legacy in the U.S. has continued. This is why people still talk about Tarleton, though you don't really hear about it much. Though his reputation in the United States was big, was not big but horrible, Tarleton was admired in Britain for his military service and became a prominent public figure in the late 1800s and 19th century. So he was actually even though he's a butcher and really should have been reprimanded and taken off the battlefield because of that, you can't really blame him to some extent. He was doing everything he could to actually become, to make the British win. So he ends up dying at 78 after he actually has a long-time relationship with an actress, Mary Robinson, known as Perdita. So just throwing that out there. Just thought that was interesting. A little part that I brought up in my notes. Okay. But that basically ends the American Revolution. Yorktown is captured. The British are captured. They're basically sent packing back to England, back to Britain. Now, some of them actually go up to Canada, and a lot of the loyalists go up to Canada because they don't want to go to Britain. They want to stay in the Americas. So they go up to Nova Scotia and go to Canada. And in here, they create their own settlements. Now, there's a lot of controversy there. We won't go into it. That's actually in the text. You can read about it. But there are other things that are happening. Now, the treaty itself actually have to do with, it literally takes 2 years to sign a treaty because of negotiations. Oh, man, my neck is going out. Okay, so because of this time period, there are still battles that are being fought as the British are being captured. British in the colonies. So loyalists are removed. They're being deported. That's right. Early American history, we deported a lot of the British out of here. Because again, if you're listening to our podcast Tuesdays and Thursdays, you're going to learn about one of the things that the Assyrians did. They had very smart tactics. When they took over a place, they would take all the people and they would disperse them throughout their empire. Now the colonists didn't want to do that. Instead, they took them out of the colonies and sent them packing. The loyalists, anyone that was loyal to Britain, had to get packing, had to leave. They could set up their own shop. They could have all these different things in the colonies. But if you side with the British, you have to go. So for this reason, he could not actually have any British left in the colonies because of the possibility that they start rebelling. That's what the Assyrians knew. The Assyrians knew anyone that stays in that area after they've conquered it, they will continue to rebel. And so in order to stop that rebellion, they had to kick him out. So they deported everyone. Everyone that would not side with the colonies and would side with as a loyalist to the British had to go. And some of them went up to Canada, which the colonists actually did not like, because that just gives another staging ground to be able to come down. Part of the treaty was to allow them to actually go up there and to start colonies up in Canada. It also gave back the British any land that was captured above New York. So anything in Canada, and a border was actually created. So those are some of the aftermaths. Some of the other ones, the British could not actually fight back in any time near that point. There was a treaty for peace. What's interesting is the War of 1812 will come up later on. The War of 1812 is the Americans and the British fighting. It's their second American Revolution, or as some people would say. But this is the hard thing. The British came back because the Americans actually declared war on them, even declared war on Canada. So this treaty is actually broken technically by the British because they were what's called inscribing the sailors. They would capture a ship, American ship, or board an American ship, and anyone that was was born British had to go and serve in their army, in their navy. So the Americans didn't like that. So they thought that the British were breaking the treaty. The British, on the other hand, when the Americans declared war on them, they're like, wait a minute, they're breaking their treaty, and came back to fight them. So, and there's not that many attacks. There's not many battles in the in the War of 1812, but there are some decisive ones. It's bigger than you really think, just because of all the things that matter around the War of 1812. We're going to get into that in 2 months. Next, we're going to be talking about the birth of the nation. After that, we're going to be talking about the mixing pot that is the Americas, and then we're going to get into the War of 1812. This will be the next battle. Technically, the next battle that the Americans are going to have with the British. But that's a major, major battle that we don't talk about that much. And we really should. Okay, so let me think. Is there anything else that I need to mention? In the book, in the textbook, you're going to learn a lot about that treaty. The treaty that's written, all the gives and takes. Again, the Americans, even though they won, they don't get everything. The British negotiate to give up the colonies, but they have to have certain things in return to make them actually sign it. And so they negotiate back and forth. They compromise. And in the end, the Americas have a certain amount of land. The United States has a certain amount of land. They're not United States yet. The colonists have their own. It's the American colonists now. It's not the British colonies. And the Canadians have their own. So stay tuned. There's going to be a lot on this. What also comes from this is what is now called the Constitution and the birth of the nation. Because the British are now gone, the United States has a really hard time putting together a nation that they know will last for hundreds, even thousands of years. That is their task. We're going to go over their task and the hardship that they go through in order to get that going. So, I will see you next time on this this Adventure Box podcast. Thanks so much for listening. We will catch you tomorrow as we talk more about Mesopotamia. Thanks again. Take care. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.